Hey, what's going on guys? John here, and today I wanted to do a in-depth video review for the DuroMax Hybrid Elite XP13000EH. So in this video I'll kind of walk you through a little bit about the setup on this, talk a little bit about some of the things that you're going to need, and we'll really just go through as much of it as possible. So I'm going to start with just walking you through the features of this and giving you some idea of what to expect. So with this particular generator, you have basically up to 13,000 starting watts, and then this actually comes down to, I believe, around 11,000 or so for running watts. So that means you could utilize quite a bit of power all throughout your house. We have a fairly large property with a detached garage that's actually even larger than our house. So we have two full 200 amp panels. We have a extra apartment in our property, and this will actually support the entire property. I'll even get into a little bit of some of our power usage just so you can see a standard day. But let's go through some of the functions of the generator itself. So this particular model actually has a dual mode, so you can run off of either propane or gas. There's basically a flip switch that you just turn it to more or less when you're ready to go on each side. You have a propane inlet here, so if you are going to be running off of propane, this is where you connect that. This is a light that basically lets you know if there's any maintenance needed or if they've detected carbon monoxide. Typically, you do not want to run this indoors whatsoever. I'm kind of in this unfinished basement space. We just store like pellets and things like that in here, and this is basically a part of our basement. So I just keep it stored in here, and overall, I wouldn't even want to run it in a space like this, obviously with the ceiling and everything like that. So you want to make sure that you are going to be running this outdoors. I'll also even show you the cable that I got and how I'm connecting all of this. You have your start button here, pretty standard. It basically works almost similar if you were turning a key on an engine in a car. You have your breakers here that basically indicate whether or not these are on. Normally, when you're ready to go with this, you pull off this panel. There's just 4 screws here. There's a little battery you have to connect the cable, and it's almost the similar as a car, but a much smaller battery. You have this battery switch. You'll flip this on, and then you basically flip the idle control on. You have the circuit breaker set to off here before you're ready to go, obviously connecting everything. You start the motor up, and then once the idle control is good, you'll flip, I believe you actually turn this off, and then you're pretty much good to go, and this will kind of stabilize. You have your large AC adapter here, so this is basically your 240 volt. I have a cable here, and this one I believe is around 30 to 40 feet. So I connect this in and into the actual generator, and then this side actually connects into a 50 amp box that I have here in the same space. So this is actually what that looks like. The previous owners actually installed this. I may even relocate this to the outdoors, but ultimately I connect it into here. This then connects into my panel, and I'm able to use a manual transfer switch on the outside of the house to actually get everything up and running, and that way we're not getting power from the grid. I'll even show you what that kind of looks like, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. Beyond that, you have your 240 volt here as well. This is a smaller 120 volts, and then you have DC protection here. You have a little readout here for the multimeter. You have a DC connection here, so if you wanted to connect this to like a car. You've got another 120 volt AC plug here, and then you have your standard GFC eyes here. So if you wanted to just plug in, I tested this with like a vacuum cleaner, right? That was a good test. Just plugging it right directly into the generator, you can do that too. On the top, you do have a meter that shows you how full the gas tank is. This holds 8.3 gallons of gasoline. I just filled it with about half a tank to start because I didn't want this sitting too long if we don't end up utilizing it. But fairly straightforward, you just spin this off, and it's no different than filling up like a lawnmower or something like that. On the other side, pretty much you're just looking at the motor. You do have the oil fill. This will take roughly about, it's like, this is basically a quart, so it's about 1.5 quarts, I believe, is what we used to fill this, and we use 10W30, which is what it recommends in the manual, and you have your dipstick here, so you can test how much is in there. They do include a funnel, so you're not going to spill the oil everywhere, and ultimately, that worked pretty well. In terms of moving this around, you have these large arms that actually come up here, and you obviously have 2 of them, and this will allow you to just simply lift this up and utilize those wheels in the front. And in my case, I'll usually just keep it stored right here, and if I was to go run this, I'll just move it out back here in behind in my yard, and then I can run this cord all the way from back here inside and up into my plug. So overall, this thing is an absolute beast. I did want to cover one other thing that you may want to do, because when I originally got this, one of my concerns was that we actually have, I'll just kind of show my setup here and I'll walk around the house. We actually have a gas boiler that's separate, a whole separate boiler that's in the back here. And this actually heats our garage. I'll kind of show you my property so you have some idea of what's going on. So if I walk up to the front of my driveway here, my house is over here on the right. So this is basically a standard like 3-bedroom house. And traditionally with something like this, obviously this is going to be like a standard house, not using too much power, but we have this detached garage with a apartment above it. So this is the garage. The entire thing is heated. I have a whole separate room there in the end and this finished apartment above. So if everybody's doing stuff right in the wintertime, let's say we've got all the mini splits on, using a lot of electricity, maybe there's a dryer going, something like that, we're going to be using a lot of power. So what I decided to do is our main breaker is actually in the basement over on this corner of the house. So what I did is I hired an electrician and they came in and we were going to install a manual transfer switch. But what I wanted to do is future-proof myself, so if we decided to upgrade it in the future to a standby generator, this would allow us to do that. So what I did is I installed a automatic transfer switch, and this actually has a capability. If you take this off, I'm not going to do that right now, there's a small, almost like pencil style switch that you can put into a plug and it will act as a manual transfer switch. So you can flip this down. This basically will shut off all the power coming from the grid, and now I can go connect my generator to that 50 amp connection right to the generator, run that, and run the entire house. Now, because we heat with things like this Mitsubishi Electric, if we had a really harsh winter day, maybe it's like -2 degrees out here. I'm actually in New England, so it gets pretty cold here in the wintertime. We might be running this. We have a pellet stove that heats our basement. We also have an oil furnace in the basement here, so sometimes if it's really cold we'll run all three just to really heat the place. And then of course I have the natural gas actually running over in the main part of that garage. So if we were to lose power, it's going to be pretty detrimental to our setup. So I wanted to suggest maybe putting something like this in, the automatic transfer switch, along with the generator. That's going to basically allow you to have the future proofing capability without, going the extra mile and having the electrician do like a manual transfer switch that you would later have to then upgrade to an automatic transfer switch. So anyway, I hope that helps you guys and gives you some idea of what to expect. Pretty much the main setup obviously would be having that electrician come in, making sure you have the correct cable, you've got your 50 amp, you have your manual or automatic transfer switch, and then of course you've set this all up. Now, one thing I did also want to point out is I have a electric meter that allows me to monitor what's happening for electric usage. So I'll actually pull this up. It's called SPAN. This allows me to see what the house is using for electricity. So this is a pretty standard day. It's not super cold out, so we're probably not even using that much electricity right now. You can see the whole house is using about 2,700 watts. So if right now the power were to go out, I would actually only need to run this generator very minimally, right? It would only be using about 1/4 of the power. And you can see where it all breaks down. The water heater's using quite a bit right now. The garage is using about 1,000, and then everything else is taking up little bits like lights and outlets and things like that throughout the house, and the kitchen, things of that nature. So this is going to be more than enough unless you decided to run like 2 dryers or go absolutely crazy with power. That generator is going to be way more than enough for the most average of homes. So anyway, I hope that helps, and hope you guys found this useful. Thanks for taking a look, and I'll talk to you later.